Right now, behind the scenes, investigators are keeping everything tightly under wraps. But make no mistake, they're actively working the case, carefully digging through layers of digital evidence. There's a real possibility the victim may have communicated with her abductor without even realizing the danger. Phones don't just connect people, they record nearly everything. And those seemingly insignificant data points could become the key, allowing agents to trace back movements and interactions from days, even weeks before the disappearance. A major question continues to surface. Was the suspect acting alone? Some believe this could be a solo operation, but others strongly disagree. Based on investigative experience, the likelihood of an accomplice cannot be ignored. After all, an 84-year-old woman vanishing from her own home in Tucson, Arizona is not something easily carried out by just one individual. And Nancy Guthrie remains missing, and the case is growing more mysterious by the day. Investigators are quietly piecing together every fragment of information, with a sharp focus on digital footprints, where the most critical clues may be hiding. Because sometimes, it's the traces left behind unknowingly that end up exposing the entire truth. And one of the most striking details revealed so far is that Nancy's cell phone was left behind at her home, and that alone opens up a flood of questions. Was there any form of contact before she disappeared? Calls, messages, or subtle exchanges that may have gone unnoticed at the time but now hold critical value. Investigators are looking closely, because even the smallest interaction could point directly toward the person responsible. But there's another angle that could be even more revealing. What if the individual, or individuals, involved made a mistake? Nancy's home is located in the Catalina foothills, an area covered by more than 40 cell towers. Any device that was powered on nearby would have automatically connected, silently leaving behind a digital footprint. That data exists, and authorities know exactly how to track it down. Experts in digital forensics say this kind of evidence has been the turning point in some of the most complex missing person cases in recent years. It doesn't usually deliver one dramatic breakthrough, but piece by piece, it builds a path forward. And in the case of Nancy Guthrie, that process may already be underway. Because when a phone is active, it doesn't need permission to leave a trace. It constantly pings nearby towers, recording its presence without the user ever realizing it. And now, those invisible signals could be telling investigators far more than anyone expected, possibly revealing exactly what happened, and who was there when it did. Every signal, every connection, none of it simply disappears. It's all recorded, stored, and can be retrieved. Around Nancy's home in the Catalina foothills, more than 40 cell towers operate within a 3-mile radius. That means any device that was powered on near the time of her disappearance didn't just pass through unnoticed, it left behind a trace. Investigators rely on a process known as a cell tower dump to uncover that hidden layer of activity. This isn't limited to just the nearest tower. In reality, devices often connect to multiple towers depending on signal strength and network traffic. So analysts collect data across the entire area, then begin the painstaking process of sorting through it, identifying which devices belong there and which ones stand out. Anything that doesn't fit the normal pattern immediately draws attention. And once flagged, it becomes a priority for deeper investigation. This method has already proven its value in some of the most challenging missing person cases. It's not fast, and it's far from simple, but it's effective. Especially when time matters, this level of detail can be the difference between a cold trail and a critical lead. Cell tower data has repeatedly helped investigators move cases forward when other evidence falls short. And in Nancy Guthrie's case, the conditions are almost ideal for this kind of analysis. With such a dense network of towers surrounding her Tucson home, the amount of data available is massive. But rather than being overwhelming, that volume creates opportunity. More signals, more records, more chances to identify something out of place. Because behind all of this data are unique digital fingerprints. Every time a phone connects, it logs an IMSI, a code tied directly to the SIM card. In some cases, it also captures the IMEI, identifying the physical device itself. Every ping, every connection, every silent registration is automatically recorded. And within those records, investigators may already have exactly what they need, waiting to be uncovered. And when investigators begin pulling data from dozens of cell towers at once, what they get is a massive pool of digital identifiers, each one tied to a specific device. From there, the real work begins. Every identifier is cross-checked against subscriber records, each user verified, each presence explained. One by one, the known devices are eliminated, narrowing the field down to those that simply don't belong. And it's within that shrinking list that the most important clues often emerge. But this process isn't without its challenges. There's always the possibility that whoever is responsible used a prepaid burner phone, purchased with cash, leaving behind no name, no account, no direct trail. At first glance, it may seem like a dead end. But even a burner phone has a beginning. It had to be purchased somewhere. And that moment, caught on surveillance footage, logged in a retail system, or linked through subtle financial patterns, could be exactly what investigators are quietly zeroing in on. Because even when subscriber information leads nowhere, the digital trail doesn't simply vanish. As long as a device remains active, it continues to generate data. And while many assume cell tower records can pinpoint an exact location, the reality is different. What they provide is a defined zone, a radius that places the device within a specific area at a specific time. But that level of precision is more powerful than it sounds. According to insights gathered during the investigation, narrowing the search down to a neighborhood, a street, or even a single block gives authorities a critical advantage. It transforms a wide, uncertain search into something targeted and actionable. And once that boundary is set, additional investigative methods can take over, bringing them closer, step by step, to the truth hidden within the data. And when a device stays powered on and active, investigators don't just see general movement. They can, in certain cases, narrow its location down with striking precision, even to a specific residence. And that brings a critical question into focus in the case of Nancy Guthrie. Did the person responsible understand this risk? Did they intentionally disable their phone, switch devices, or take calculated steps to erase their digital presence before anything happened? Analysts reviewing the case have pointed out something that's hard to ignore. The suspect, as seen in surveillance footage, appears unusually calm. In situations like this, that kind of composure is rare. Most individuals show tension, hesitation, rushed movements, visible anxiety. But here, there's a level of control that stands out. It suggests something deeper, either a strong emotional detachment or experience in handling high-pressure situations without breaking. And what makes this even more unsettling is not just what the suspect does, but how he does it. There are no obvious signs of panic, no erratic behavior, no loss of control. Every movement appears steady, deliberate. For investigators, that kind of behavior is more than just unusual. It's revealing. It raises the possibility that this was not impulsive, but calculated. Because someone who can remain that composed under pressure may also be aware of the risks they leave behind, especially digital ones. That level of awareness could mean deliberate choices were made, avoiding traceable devices, limiting exposure, or even leaving a personal phone behind entirely. And right now, that possibility is likely one of the key angles investigators are working to unravel. And yet, there's a critical factor that may challenge the idea of a carefully controlled, single-actor scenario. According to reliable sources, investigators are seriously exploring the possibility that more than one person was involved. Because executing a disappearance like this, identifying the target, approaching without detection, and successfully removing them, presents logistical hurdles that are incredibly difficult for one individual to handle alone. And it doesn't stop there. Once the victim is taken, maintaining control over an extended period, days, possibly even weeks, requires coordination, planning, and resources. That's where the digital angle becomes even more significant. Coordination means communication. And communication, no matter how careful, almost always leaves behind a trace. If multiple people were involved in Nancy Guthrie's disappearance, the chances that at least one of them slipped up digitally increased dramatically. And while investigators continue to map out those potential digital footprints, Nancy's own phone may hold an entirely different set of clues. The morning her disappearance was discovered started with a phone call, one that immediately signaled something was wrong. Within minutes, her family was thrown into panic, reaching out to hospitals, contacting authorities, searching desperately for answers that made sense. But what they encountered instead only deepened the mystery. The back doors of her home were left open. Her purse remained untouched. Her phone was still inside. Nothing appeared to be missing. And that combination, an open entry point with all personal belongings left behind, quickly shifted the focus away from any natural or medical explanation and towards something far more deliberate and far more troubling. By the time authorities arrived, Nancy Guthrie's family had already begun calling local hospitals, desperately searching for answers. The response was swift, but those first hours were described as pure chaos, calls being made in every direction while investigators tried to make sense of the scene in front of them. Among all the early details, one stood out immediately. Her phone and purse were still inside the home. That detail alone carries significant weight. It strongly suggests that whatever happened was neither planned nor voluntary. She didn't leave those items behind by choice. She didn't leave with anything at all. And that abandoned phone may now hold some of the most critical answers. Investigators are likely combing through every detail. Who contacted her in the days leading up to her disappearance, whether any unfamiliar numbers appeared, whether any messages seemed out of place. Because if someone reached out to Nancy before she vanished, that interaction may still be preserved, waiting to be uncovered. The physical scene only deepens the mystery. Nancy appears to have left without shoes. The back doors were left open. Nothing inside the home was disturbed, yet she was gone. And despite being left behind, her phone may be the most valuable piece of evidence in the entire case. Modern devices don't forget. They store call logs, messages, location data, app activity, everything. And within that data could be the last trace of what happened. But there's an even more revealing layer. Nancy's phone was connected to her pacemaker through a short-range wireless signal. The moment that connection was lost, it would have generated an automatic timestamp, potentially marking the exact second she was taken. A level of precision no eyewitness could ever provide. And when investigators began building the timeline, the results were unsettling. Every second matters, and every data point adds clarity. According to publicly released information, at 1:47 a.m., the door camera at Nancy's home suddenly disconnected. Just minutes later, at 2:12 a.m., additional digital activity helped further define that window. The sequence is starting to take shape, and it's pointing toward something deliberate. Initially, it was believed that the camera footage might be lost due to the lack of a registered account. But investigators managed to recover it anyway. And now, with each recovered frame and every logged signal, the timeline is becoming clearer, revealing a story that someone clearly tried to hide. The recovered footage has now placed a suspect directly on camera, giving investigators something they didn't have in the earliest hours: a visual presence to anchor the case. When that is combined with the door camera disconnecting at 1:47 a.m. and the pacemaker signal dropping at 2:28 a.m., a structured timeline begins to form. These are fixed points, precise, verifiable moments. And this is exactly how digital investigations take shape, built piece by piece, each data point adding clarity where there was once uncertainty. As for Nancy's phone, sources indicate it has likely already been examined by forensic experts. But its true value depends on one critical question. Was there ever direct contact between her and the person responsible? If no such communication exists, then the phone's most important role may come down to that single timestamp from the pacemaker connection, redirecting investigators toward a broader analysis of surrounding cell tower data. Based on everything known so far, that cell tower data remains one of the strongest leads. It has the potential to reveal exactly which devices were active in the area that night, and whether any of them can be linked to the crime. But that's only one layer. In reality, modern neighborhoods are saturated with surveillance, far more than most people realize. And every camera, whether obvious or hidden, becomes a silent witness. In this case, the visual evidence extends beyond just the front door. A Nest camera positioned at the front of Nancy's home has already produced useful footage. Meanwhile, a second camera located at the rear of the property is still under active recovery, with investigators working to extract any images it may hold. Whether full video exists from that device is still unclear, but even a single frame could prove critical. And then there's a detail that shifts the focus beyond the immediate scene. According to recent reports, digital activity tied to the property itself has raised new questions. Google search data shows a noticeable spike in interest surrounding Nancy Guthrie's home, a residence her family has owned for decades. On December 5th alone, approximately 63 searches related to that property were recorded within Arizona. And now, investigators are left to determine whether that surge was coincidence or something far more intentional. Just 5 days later, on December 10th, another spike. 66 additional searches tied to the same property, all originating within the state. Then, weeks later, at the end of January, Nancy Guthrie disappears. The timeline is hard to dismiss as coincidence. The real question now is whether those searches can be traced back to specific individuals or devices. At first glance, without a physical device in hand, it might seem like a dead end, but in reality, it's anything but. A data like this doesn't simply vanish. It can be subpoenaed directly from the platform that recorded it. IP addresses, account details, device identifiers, each piece can be recovered and analyzed. Investigators have solved major cases starting with nothing more than search history. And if someone was researching Nancy's home weeks before she vanished, that digital trail may already be pointing somewhere very specific. Because even attempts to stay anonymous rarely hold up under scrutiny. A disposable email account doesn't exist in isolation. It connects to cookies, linked numbers, other accounts. Each connection creates another pathway, and investigators follow those pathways step by step. What starts as an untraceable search can eventually lead back to a real identity. And the same principle applies to the missing footage from the rear Nest camera at Nancy's property. That data isn't gone. It's likely stored on a remote server controlled by the provider. But accessing it isn't instant. It requires a legal process, establishing probable cause, securing a warrant, submitting formal requests, and waiting for the response. It's methodical, and it takes time. What people see on television, evidence retrieved in minutes, is far from reality. Every piece of digital evidence, whether it's video footage, search records, or account data, must be obtained through strict legal channels. If that process isn't followed precisely, the evidence risks becoming unusable in court. And that's why cases like Nancy Guthrie's don't move quickly, they move carefully. The pace isn't a sign of failure, it's a sign of precision. Investigators aren't rushing, they're building a case designed to hold when it matters most. Because behind the scenes, every data point, every connection, every recovered detail is being locked into place, forming a picture that may already be closer to the truth than it appears. If dozens of searches are tied to Nancy Guthrie's property, each linked to a different account, investigators can't simply access them all at once. Every single account requires its own legal justification. That means separate warrants, separate documentation, and individual court approval before any data can be retrieved. It's not a delay caused by inefficiency. It's the legal structure that governs how evidence is collected, and it's strictly enforced. Federal investigators don't bypass this system. Every request, whether it's for account data, search history, or platform records, must be backed by proper legal authority. And the process itself is intensive. Each warrant requires detailed written justification, outlining exactly why that specific data is relevant. It's meticulous, time-consuming work that never gets shown in dramatized crime stories. There are limited situations where things can move faster. In cases involving immediate danger, emergency provisions can allow investigators to access certain records more quickly, with formal warrants filed afterward. But those exceptions are narrow. They can't be broadly applied just because a case feels urgent. And in Nancy Guthrie's case, the investigation is unfolding exactly as it should, carefully, lawfully, and with precision. That pace isn't a setback. It's how a case is built to last. Because when every piece of evidence is collected properly, it becomes something that can stand in court and deliver real accountability. And interestingly, the timing of Nancy's disappearance, around 2 a.m., may actually work in investigators' favor. At that hour, the environment changes. Roads are quieter. Traffic is minimal. Any vehicle moving through the area becomes far more noticeable against the limited activity. In modern neighborhoods, cameras are nearly everywhere. Doorbell systems, street surveillance, traffic intersections, nearby businesses, all recording continuously. But in the early morning hours, the volume of footage drops dramatically. That makes anything unusual easier to detect. A single vehicle, captured moving through multiple cameras, can be tracked step by step. And that's how the process unfolds, like a chain, each camera linking to the next, gradually revealing a path that someone thought would never be seen. A single piece of digital evidence rarely tells the whole story, but it points in a direction. Investigators take that direction and follow it, step by step, searching for the next camera along the path, and then the next. Each fragment connects, each clip adds context, until a clear route begins to form. It's slow, methodical work, but this is exactly how cases like this are built from the ground up. This approach has proven effective before. In past high-profile investigations, cell tower data first revealed a direction of movement. From there, authorities identified cameras positioned along that route. And in the end, the footage placed a suspect exactly where the digital evidence said they would be. That's how these cases come together, not in one dramatic moment, but through a steady accumulation of facts. Frame by frame, data point by data point, until the picture can no longer be ignored. That same process is almost certainly unfolding right now in the Nancy Guthrie case. And the timing, around 2 a.m., adds another advantage beyond just camera footage. During those early morning hours, overall cell tower activity drops significantly. People aren't actively using their phones, but devices still quietly register with nearby towers. Which means the data is still there, just far less cluttered. For investigators running tower dumps across multiple locations, that reduction in background activity becomes a powerful advantage. Fewer active devices means fewer to eliminate, and anything that doesn't belong becomes far easier to spot. But perhaps the most critical detail lies in something even simpler. Even if the person responsible was careful enough to leave their phone behind, they still had to locate Nancy's home. And finding a specific residential address, especially one not widely known, almost always involves a search. That search had to happen somewhere. On a device. Through a platform. Connected to an account. Leaving behind a record. The pattern of searches tied to the property in December, weeks before Nancy disappeared, strongly suggests planning, not impulse. Someone was looking into that location ahead of time. And that kind of digital research doesn't just disappear. Even when someone believes they've covered their tracks, those connections remain, buried, but recoverable. Once investigators identify a person of interest, that evidence becomes even more powerful. Because the process begins to narrow, like a funnel. Search activity linked to Nancy Guthrie's property starts pointing toward specific accounts. And those accounts may ultimately point to someone real. Once specific accounts are identified, investigators move to the next phase, examining them through legally obtained warrants. If a potential suspect begins to stand out, authorities can then dig deeper, requesting historical cell tower records tied to that individual. This doesn't just reveal where they were on the night Nancy disappeared, it can map their movements days, even weeks before. And in a case like this, that timeline is everything. Because an operation targeting a specific person at a specific home is rarely spontaneous. It suggests preparation, planning, the kind of intent that often involves returning to the location beforehand, watching, studying, waiting for the right moment. And each of those visits may have quietly left behind a digital trace, recorded by nearby cell towers without the individual ever realizing it. Building a case to the level of beyond reasonable doubt is not quick work, especially in a high-profile investigation where there is no room for error. Sources close to the case indicate that investigators are unlikely to move forward with charges until every piece of evidence aligns perfectly. That's not hesitation. That's discipline. And Nancy Guthrie's disappearance has captured attention far beyond her community. Across the country, people are watching, waiting, and asking the same question: what really happened? Behind the scenes, the investigation continues to move forward, carefully assembling each layer of evidence. And it may ultimately be the digital trail, left behind unintentionally, that provides the answers everyone is searching for. And as this case continues to unfold, one point remains critical. Any piece of information, no matter how small it may seem, could be the missing link. Because in investigations like this, it often takes just one overlooked detail to expose the truth hidden beneath everything else. Our authorities are urging the public to come forward. The FBI tip line remains open at 1-800-CALL-FBI, and anyone who reaches out can do so completely anonymously. A reward exceeding $1 million has been put forward by both the family and law enforcement, an indication of just how critical this case has become. Nancy Guthrie is 84 years old. She is not just a name in a headline. She is a mother, a loved one, and someone who deserves to be found. Through it all, the Guthrie family has remained strong, but what they need now are answers. And behind the scenes, those answers may already be taking shape. The digital trail is there, being carefully examined, piece by piece. Cell tower records, search history, recovered camera footage, even the precise timestamp from her pacemaker, all of it is being analyzed with precision. And what's publicly known may only be a fraction of what investigators are actually working with. Because in cases like this, the most critical details are often the ones kept out of view. But one thing remains clear: someone, somewhere, knows more than they've said. And in a world driven by digital evidence, staying invisible is harder than ever. Every action leaves a trace. Every decision creates a record. And those records have a way of resurfacing. As this investigation continues, updates and verified developments will keep emerging. The search for the truth is far from over. Stay aware. Stay informed. Because sometimes, it only takes one detail to finally bring everything into the light.